In this video, we're going to discuss everything there is to know about living in a tiny house. We're going to discuss the pros and benefits. We're also going to get into the cons as well. So if tiny living is something you've been considering, this video is for you, so stay tuned. My name is Richard Soto, a local real estate broker with VIP Realty right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And if you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button as we do weekly videos talking all about living, working, and playing right here in North Texas. We also tour some of the best real estate listings on the market today. In this video, we're going to discuss tiny home living. So let's get right into it. Tiny homes became very popular during the COVID pandemic, and it has become a trend called the tiny house movement. So what does that actually mean? Well, people during this time and economic difficulties of the last several years, people are looking to save money, and what better way than to limit the expenditures on most of our biggest impact on our budget, which is going to be our housing. The tiny house movement is an architectural and social movement that encourages living a simpler life in a smaller space. People from all walks of life have determined that a large home, and more specifically the larger cost of living that comes with it, is both unnecessary and a detriment to their happiness. These people have turned to tiny house living to reduce the financial and emotional burden of stuff, which makes total sense. Why would anyone want to have a massive mortgage payment? I know I don't. In addition to that, as I was walking through my home today, there is stuff in every closet, in every room that is completely unnecessary. So I understand how people want to move from that lifestyle to a simpler lifestyle where you just don't need all that crap and you have nobody to impress. You have a home, it's safe and secure. You're saving thousands of dollars in mortgage and rental payments each year. I totally get it. As I was walking out the garage, jumping into my car, I looked in my garage. I have so much clutter. There is literally about 20 different basketballs on my racks. Who needs 20 basketballs? Nobody. So I completely understand the movement and its appeal. Now, what type of individual is moving into tiny homes? Typically, they're going to fall into two categories, starting with younger adults and singles, or young couples that don't have any children, which makes perfect sense. Why would you need such large space if it's unnecessary? So that's the first category, young adults without children. And two is retirees that have already stopped working. And we can dig into detail a little bit more. With the younger adults and singles, there's no need for all the extra room that you would need if you have children. You're able to easily move around. If you wanted to move and be more of a nomad, you could definitely do that by owning a tiny home. If you own a regular home, it's harder to sell, especially if you didn't call Richard Soto and the VIP Realty team. It could sit on the market. It's just much more hassle with a tiny home. You could actually lease it out, do an Airbnb. So there's a lot of options for a younger single person or a younger couple to easily just get up and move. You could also put it on the back of your hitch and move your tiny home to a different location. So it makes sense that it's very appealing to the younger crowd. In addition to that, a younger person hasn't accumulated so much stuff and unnecessary crap all over their house. So a lot of benefits for a young adult. Moving on to the retirees, when we retire, unfortunately, income just stops. However, those bills keep coming in each and every month. So it makes sense that a retiree would want to cut costs and not have all the overhead that a larger home has, such as a massive electric bill, lawn costs, pool costs. It is just going to be way more expensive having a regular home than a tiny home. So those are just some reasons why younger adults and retirees choose to live in a tiny home. Okay, let's get into the benefits of owning a tiny home, and they're going to be considerable. Number one is the cost effectiveness of living in a tiny home. As we discussed earlier, it's going to be much less than a traditional home. As a matter of fact, a lot of the tiny homes are going to be less than the car that you own and drive. So talk about considerable savings. You also have the same quality as a traditional home. So there's going to be a ton of benefits of living the tiny house lifestyle. Despite their lower cost, a properly built tiny home can provide housing for decades. Once a home is built, the savings don't stop. Because of their smaller size, most of the utilities and all the maintenance costs are less as well. While there is no saving to some bills like cable TV and garbage pickup, there are considerable savings to others like electric and gas. Additional savings are had with reduced property taxes or rent. Moving on to the second benefit, and that's going to be simplification. No more needing to keep up with the Joneses and your neighbors across the street. You're going to have a simpler life where you're really just trying to meet your needs and enjoy your lifestyle without having to do too much, as my kids tell me. So it's just going to be a simpler lifestyle where you can focus on things that actually make you happy. And for the majority of us, stuff really isn't going to be one of those items. Financial reasons is the main reason why people are drawn to the tiny house movement. However, the simplicity is what keeps them in it. Now moving on to the next benefit, which is going to be environmental benefits. Using fewer utilities not only saves money, but it also has an impact on the environment. Some homes go as far as to use no utilities by being completely off-grid. Also, with less consumption comes less waste going into landfills. So as you can see, there's going to be a ton of benefits in regards to purchasing a tiny home. Quite frankly, I've been interested in purchasing one for myself for several years. I'm currently looking for some land. I'd love to have a couple of acres, some stocked water ponds with some fish, and I would love to set a tiny house right there on my property. So I definitely see the appeal for people wanting to have a tiny home. However, let's get into the cons of living in a tiny house, and there's going to be several. Number one, it's almost impossible to get a mortgage. So if you don't have cash or a massive down payment, you're going to have a difficult time finding financing. Properties valued at less than $100,000 aren't generally going to sit well with traditional lenders. Plus, if your tiny house is on wheels, you'll probably be rejected outright, as homes that aren't anchored to a foundation aren't considered real estate. There are alternate routes of financing to explore, like taking out a personal loan or raising all the capital to build a tiny home yourself, but those can prove more difficult and a little tricky. So if you don't have cash, so your best bet if you're wanting to purchase a tiny home is hopefully you'll have cash in hand to do so. In addition to that, another con is the land purchase, and quite often the land is going to be significant because a lot of land is going to be just as much as acquiring a traditional home. Tiny homes have to sit someplace, and usually that someplace requires a deed and a title in order for you to legally be there, unless you're the outlaw type. Land can be expensive, especially if you're purchasing multiple acres of property. Plus, if you're not zoned to build a tiny house, or there isn't a septic system in place, or any number of other hidden restrictions and guidelines, you could face some difficulty in getting your tiny house built. So those are just some of the cons. In addition to that, I can think to myself right now, another con that I personally would have is I just toured 40 different models, is going to be the closet spaces. I walk into the tiny homes, they look so cute. I really like them. Porches, everything you have in your traditional home. The only issue most people would probably have, especially the ladies, is the closet. The closet is about this big. Everything else is fine. So a lot of people, I don't know, especially if you have a lot of dress attire, you have business functions and meetings, it's gonna be very tight. Also, for a single person, I get the appeal, but I have two boys, especially my youngest. I have a fairly large two-story home, and when he's jumping and dunking, wrestling, I don't know what he's doing upstairs, it is extremely loud. So I could only imagine me and him being in the tiny home, and me trying to get some work done and make phone calls, it would be impossible. It's not going to happen. So living in a tiny home is really going to be specific to a certain type of individual. I personally would love to have a tiny home, more so for a getaway, a weekend place to go hang out, have some acreage, have a couple of off-road vehicles, some ATVs. That would be awesome and fun for me. It would be pretty impossible with my kids to live in a tiny home full time. It just wouldn't happen. If it was just me or the kids were off to college and married, I would have no issue. I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned a little bit more about tiny home living. I enjoyed making this video for you. I learned a lot as well. If you're thinking about purchasing a tiny home or building a mega mansion, my team and I would love to assist you with your next real estate transaction, or maybe you're just looking for acreage. We are here to help you. We have offices in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Midland, throughout the state of Texas and California as well. And as always, I'll see you on the next video.